Very good afternoon to everyone who's logged on so far. I'll just wait for the go-ahead from Entab team before making a start. I think we still have a few minutes left. Good afternoon to everyone, and I think I'll make a start just now. So thank you very much to the Entab team and Mr. Rajiv for very kindly inviting me to take this webinar. It's a great honor. And I've worked with the Entab team before, written in their Campus Care magazine and done an interview with them. And very grateful for all of the good work that they're doing to try to bring educators together and create opportunities like this. Thank you also very much to all of the participants who have very kindly come on this call on a Sunday afternoon. It's great to meet you all virtually, and I hope we'll get a chance to interact a little bit. I am going to just spend a few minutes sharing some of my thoughts on this subject, and then hopefully we can open the floor to questions. I guess you can write questions in the comments, and hopefully I'll be able to provide some answers. The topic which we're going to talk about today is that of managing student well-being during this time of the coronavirus crisis. I really think that this is a topic which is on the minds of many educators. I think at the beginning of this crisis, educators were thinking about, how to manage students' learning, how to get students online, how to get teachers online, which platform should I use? Should I use Zoom? Oh no, Zoom has security problems. Should I use Google Hangout? How do I get all my kids to come on each class? These were the questions that were coming at the beginning of this lockdown period. I think now that we are at least 1 month into this lockdown, more than 1 month into this lockdown, I think the thoughts and questions have shifted towards not only how students can learn, because educators all around the country have really made a very good job of coming online, getting their students online, and conducting online classes. So that's happening now. That problem mostly has been solved by most educators. The problem which has not been solved yet is the well-being, the happiness of the students. And I want to begin by just reading a message that I received from some students in our school, came to me via their principal. I just want to read this out to you. So it says, "Dear sir, we are students of such and such a section, and we are planning on initiating a project to help students cope up with the stress and anxiety that this current situation has thrown up. We plan on creating a digital helpline service and also create a video library of how students all around are coping up in these situations. Problems such as study anxiety, depression, poor sleep habits, disorganization, feeling overwhelmed, eating right and staying healthy. We wholeheartedly request you to help endorse this initiative and collect videos where students express their views and come up with solutions on the problems they face. And these clips can be shared on WhatsApp or Gmail, and they give all of the details." So this is a message that I received via students of one of the sections of the campus. These students have recognized that there is a fundamental problem of well-being amongst their peers at this time, and they are wanting to do something about it. And the solution which they have proposed for doing something about it is creating a platform, an opportunity, a forum for students to express their own views on the problems they're facing, make recordings of videos, or write something on how they're coping, how they are solving these problems at home, and then sharing them on a common platform that all students can participate in, so that students across this organization of schools can learn from each other about what strategies they are using to manage the stressful time that they are facing at the moment. And I thought this was such a wonderful initiative, and I just had to share it with you all in the context of this session on well-being and managing students' well-being. This is an example of students taking responsibility for their own and for their peers' well-being and doing something about it. And I think it's something which is realistic for all schools to take up in a way. You know, schools across the country can encourage their students to share their views, express their vulnerabilities, and let others know their strategies on how to deal with the stresses that they're facing. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, what are the reasons for the stress. And of course, everyone in the whole country, everyone in the whole world is facing basic level of anxiety at present because there's so much uncertainty about this situation. No one knows when things are going to change, how long this is going to go on for, when things will improve. No one knows. Everyone has that same anxiety. But I think that same anxiety in adults is actually much stronger, much worse when it comes to young people. I think young people have weaker coping mechanisms for dealing with such an uncertain situation. And they have their own personal uncertainties to worry about. They are also responsible for their own learning. Students feel responsible for their own learning, and they are uncertain about what's going to happen for their future exams at all ages. I'm not talking only about board exams, but even for younger students, concerned about their own exams, their school exams, their results, completing their syllabus, progressing to the next section. They have no idea what's going to happen. And so there's a lot of confusion, a lot of stress. Apart from that, students, young people in general, all people in fact, but especially young people, they need a certain routine, structure, schedule in their life that keeps them grounded. It gives them a sense of purpose. It gives them something very solid to work towards. And this lockdown situation has thrown their routine and schedule very much off balance. So they're not able to follow a routine pattern in the way that they normally do. And this can leave many students in a state of confusion and anxiety. And there's a lot of studies to show this, that young people who do not have a very solid structure to their lives do face more anxiety issues. So this is another problem which all students are facing at present. And then an additional source of major stress is the fact that normally children look up to their parents as strong figures who provide guidance and balance and are a pillar of strength for them. Right now, parents themselves in many homes are also facing stresses. Some of them are trying to work from home. Some of them may be in jobs which, they're small businesses which are not running at the moment. They're not making an income. Some of them may be in jobs which have been laid off, and very unfortunately, certain jobs and offices have closed down as a result of all of this. So, the parents themselves in the homes are going through a lot more stress than normal, and they are therefore not able to provide the same support and strength for their children that they normally do. So there's a huge amount of anxiety, trouble for children at present. And that is why I believe that managing this stress of students needs to be educators' number one priority at the present time. And that's a very important point and a very significant point, because when school runs as normal, hopefully educators are also thinking about well-being at that time, but I doubt very much that it's the number one priority. Maybe it's the number two priority, but otherwise, the number one priority of educators tends to be, in most schools, the academic learning of children, the syllabus, the exam results. That's the number one priority normally. And if people think about well-being, it's at best number two priority. But right now, during this time when things are difficult, we need to make students' well-being the number one priority because they are facing so many well-being issues. Now, if well-being is becoming the number one priority, obviously that means that everything else can only be number two priority. So what is normally number one priority? That's imparting the syllabus. Now we need to think about the syllabus as important, yes, but the number two priority. And I think when we're doing online learning, we're doing online classes, live classes, giving assignments, the purpose of doing so at the present time is not primarily imparting the syllabus. We should not think of it in terms of catching up with the syllabus, pursuing the whole curriculum as normal. Actually, I think it serves two purposes right now. Number one, online learning, continuing learning at present, has an important effect on preventing learning loss. So learning loss is a concept in education whereby actually if students spend a long period of time without engaging in any kind of studies, then what they already learned before goes out of their mind. So they go backwards in their learning, they lose learning if they are not engaged with their teacher, if they're not engaged in subjects. Whereas if they are engaged in some way, even if they're not directly revising what they have learned, just through the very act of being engaged, it prevents learning loss. So even if it doesn't necessarily add new learning, at the very least, it prevents going backwards in learning, which is a very important thing to do right now. And so that's one sort of main reason for why we are conducting online learning at the present time. The other reason why we are, I think, conducting online learning at the present time, beyond the syllabus, is that doing so provides routine and structure for students. And as I said at the beginning of this little talk, it's routine and structure missing is one of the major causes of anxiety for our students. So in conducting classes, in giving something of a timetable, in giving a purpose to work towards, in bringing students together with their teachers and peers, we are providing structure and routine and meaning in their lives, which prevents anxiety. So keep this in mind. Rather than doing online mainly for the sake of imparting the whole syllabus, getting through the curriculum, putting pressure on students, actually we are conducting online mainly to provide them with a routine and structure and to prevent their learning loss. And yes, of course, if you can get through the syllabus as well, that's great, but it is not the big priority right now. Reason for that is also that it's actually, it's hard to be practical about imparting the whole syllabus right now. And there are a few reasons for that. Online learning is a very new territory. It requires a new kind of pedagogy. It requires a new way of teaching. A lot of the things that teachers have been trained to do in recent years, such as collaborative learning, interactive learning, that is really difficult to do online, although some teachers are making a great effort to try various ways of doing that. But in general, it's a very difficult thing to do online. And because of all of this being a different way of doing things, it's unclear how much learning will take place anyway. With the best effort, with the best attempt to go through the syllabus and impart learning, it's very unclear how much learning will be able to take place. And even if learning is taking place, there's another problem. It's very difficult to assess. We don't have a robust way of conducting online assessments. We don't know if we are able to give proper assessments that people are able to do securely in a time-bound manner. We don't know about that. Then, despite the best efforts of educators really trying hard with the parents, there will inevitably be, in any section, certain students who unfortunately are being left behind at the present time, despite the best efforts, because they simply may not have an internet connection in their home. They simply may not have, maybe they only have one device, one smartphone in the home, and the father is working from home and they have to prioritize using the smartphone. So there are these practical issues, which means that unfortunately there are some students being left behind, which is another difficult thing. And then finally, one more reason why trying to get through the whole curriculum syllabus at the present time is impractical is because I think online learning is a far more tiring, mentally taxing process than normal learning. I mean, speaking from my own experience, in the course of my normal job, I'm conducting meetings all the time. So, normally having a half hour, even a 1 hour meeting, it's a very normal thing. It's nothing. Now, when I do the same half hour or 1 hour meeting online, it actually becomes quite a tiring thing. I finish that meeting feeling quite exhausted. So students and teachers who are going on throughout the day doing classes, it is, of course, a very tiring thing, even more than normal in some ways. And we can't expect that we can cram in the same quantity of timetable that we would normally do in school. Most teachers have tried to make some kind of timetable which allows gaps and breaks and space. So all of that means, of course, that trying to get through the syllabus and the curriculum is an ideal, but it is not really practical in most cases. If you can do it a little bit, great. If you can't, don't worry about it. Prioritize prevention of learning loss and prioritize providing these students with a sense of routine and structure. And now, if we agree that we shouldn't worry too much about rushing through the syllabus at the present time, that also means that we can think about using the time that we have with students online to prioritize giving time and doing activities that are important for the well-being of those students. So various teachers have come up with different strategies for doing this, but I think it's very important that at the start of every class, teachers should take a few minutes, just reserve a few minutes of time for well-being. Just talk to the students informally, ask how they're doing, just have a little chat with them, maybe a few one-to-one conversations in front of the class. You may find that some students are not comfortable in sharing what's happening in front of the class. Make a little note of it, and then maybe you can engage with that student separately in a one-to-one, just to hear them, give them a platform to express themselves. Right now, they're going to need an outlet to express themselves more than ever, because at home, normally they're coming to school and they're talking to their friends and peers. Right now, they're just stuck at home, and there are certain things which they feel maybe they can't express to their own parents. So they may need time to express that to a teacher or some other authority figure. And those schools which are fortunate enough to employ school counselors should not overlook the importance of that role during this time. And I think scheduling time with school counselors can be a very valuable thing right now for looking at the well-being of those students and just giving students a platform to air their views in a way which will be non-judgmental and confidential, which I think is something that a lot of students really need right now. So just prioritize giving that amount of time at the start of each class. Apart from that, some schools that I know about, some teachers, some classes have come up with strategies such as a kind of online assembly. And the purpose of that is, of course, again, it's not practical to conduct a real assembly in the manner that one normally does in school. But what it does achieve is that it creates that sense of community, reminds all these students that they're all in this together, that everyone else is going through the same boat, brings them together on one platform. Even if it's not practical, for example, on Zoom to have everyone's microphone on so that they can actually interact with each other because it becomes too noisy. Just the fact that they can see each other's names on there is enough to kind of create that sense of camaraderie and sense that they are all part of this struggle as a wider whole. And it gives an opportunity to convey things to the students that are motivational in nature and which might be good for their well-being. And then one last thing I want to say before I open the floor to questions is that right now we are pursuing what we might call synchronous and asynchronous learning. So synchronous learning is this kind of live class, live interaction. But asynchronous learning is, of course, all of the other learning which is going on behind the scenes, where because it's not practical to do all of the learning through live classes, you're giving a lot of assignments, trying to get students to complete these things in their own time, and then maybe they share with the class next time you come online. So let us not overlook the use of the possibility of using asynchronous learning time, offline learning time, for activities that are good for well-being. And the ways to do that is, for example, get students to work on projects about what's going on in their homes or what's happening around them or on their views on the situation, to share these things with the class. The homeworks, if we let go of this, again, I keep repeating, if we let go of this obsession with completing the syllabus and we accept that there are more important things right now, then we can direct our homeworks towards this kind of thing. So even if it's not necessarily going to boost their advancement towards attainment of certain marks in a subject, it is going to boost their sense of well-being right now if homework is a little more innovative in nature, maybe a little off syllabus, gives students an opportunity to exercise their creativity and to do their own thing that way, and maybe to work with their parents also, because doing something that fosters a sense of unity in the home is actually a really valuable thing right now. So if they do a piece of work or a project work that involves working alongside their parents or siblings, that is something that can really help them feel good and improve their home situation to some extent. So these are really just some of my basic thoughts on what we should be doing right now. And the main thing to emphasize is that whereas normally in school, the number one priority is unlikely to be well-being, it's usually marks. Right now, the number one priority over and above everything else has to be the well-being of students. And so having said that, I think I've spoken for about 15, 20 minutes. I would love to just open up the floor to any questions. And I guess you can write the questions in the comments here. I think Mr. Rajiv had written a question earlier on. He's written, yes. Sir, during this lockdown, what platform would you recommend for online classes that are flexible, easy to use, and free or inexpensive? So this is the question that has been on everyone's mind since the beginning: which platform to use? And I'm very cautious of doing a direct endorsement of any company in these forums. But what I would say is that you want a platform which has certain security protocols. I'm not talking about high security. I think there's been a lot of confusion, with the thing that's gone around about Zoom, the news that has gone around about Zoom. People have become very worried and scared about Zoom because of security issues. And actually, let us be clear about the difference between the type of security issues that is meant in those news stories and the type of security issues that we as educators need to worry about. Those types of security issues mean that, it could be prone to hacking, it could be prone to people eavesdropping, And that is a problem, if the government is using Zoom to conduct its meetings online, or if big businesses and corporations are using Zoom to conduct their business online. That's a problem. In our classes, if someone is eavesdropping, first of all, it's extremely unlikely that anyone would. And secondly, even if they do, frankly, it's not a big problem. What is a problem is kind of children doing mischief. And the one problem with Zoom is that you can't always track the user who logs in. And that is why we've been trying to switch to Google Hangout in the past few weeks, only because it allows logging in, it requires logging in through a particular institutional ID, so that you can always trace whichever user is in, and therefore children can't kind of log in and do mischief without being traced. Other people have written their recommendations in the comments. Of course, it's hard for teachers to keep adjusting to new platforms, but if they can try others, then there's Microsoft Teams, there's Cisco WebEx, and these are quite good. Now, let me just go back to the questions. There's a question from Ms. Ashmita. How can we engage young learners during the lockdown? Any movies or books you suggest? Well, that's an interesting question, and I think most of us on this call will probably be from English medium schools. And actually, watching English language movies, is a very effective way of helping students with their learning. And I think I do have a few titles in mind. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there are some very nice English language movies which are both fun, but then also meaningful, and they teach a good message, a good moral message. So what I'll do is I'll share these titles with the team at Entab, and hopefully they can then share these recommendations more widely, and you can see that. In terms of books, it's also a wonderful time for students to try to get into the habit of reading. I would endorse, perhaps if possible for particular schools, and I know this won't be possible for everybody, but if possible, reading learning apps can be quite useful. And of course, many people object to these because people believe very strongly in the importance of the feel of a book. And even I prefer the feel of a book. I've got one right next to me now. I like to read like this instead of using online apps. But the advantage of using online apps is that if it's the right kind of sophisticated reading app, it can track a student's reading progress, it can measure a student's reading ability and level, and it can target reading material that is very appropriate for that student's age or that student's ability level, more than their age, their ability level, and give them good reading suggestions accordingly, which will help them improve their reading skill. Normally, again, unfortunately, these things fall by the wayside during normal school time, but now is different. So now is the time when these things can be done. Otherwise, there again, like I said for movies, I will pass on a few very nice kind of children's and teenage book recommendations, which are both fun to read and meaningful. I'll pass these on to the Entab team, and they can go on. I'll just have a look at the questions again. So COVID-19 is reshaping the education system. What sort of preparation any good school should do in terms of technology for managing school processes? So this is a very important question. And I think the question on everyone's mind also is, what is the exit strategy from all of this? How do we get back to normal after this is done? What will things look like after the lockdown lifts on 3rd of May? What will happen for schools? After the school lockdown lifts, maybe a few months later, what happens then? So no one can predict exactly what is going to happen. But what most people think is likely is that even if the lockdown is partially lifted after the 3rd of May, it is very unlikely that schools will lift their lockdown. In fact, any place where large numbers of people gather together, and schools is an example of that, it's very unlikely that they will be allowed to continue for a while. So a lot of people are estimating that before July or even August, it's unlikely that schools will open as normal. So that's something we have to be very aware of and something we have to be prepared for. Then even in July and August, it's not clear in what manner schools will open. I think, first of all, very important that for the schools disinfect their physical infrastructure and try to do that sort of thing as often as possible, because even if it becomes legally allowed for students to attend schools, there will be a lot of parents who will be very reluctant to allow their students to move to school. There'll be a lot of fear, and some of that fear may actually be, not unfounded fear. That might be real fear. So very important to disinfect the buildings and the buses, to create a lot of sanitation facilities across the school. And then apart from these physical things, it is quite possible that schools will try to implement social distancing even within schools. So it will be a while before returning fully back to normal. It may be that, for example, half a section is allowed on a particular day and then the other half comes the following day. One thing to bear in mind when things do go back to normal is what to do with the fact that during this time, there will have been a broad variation in students' learning, because there will, as I said before, unfortunately, there will be some students who inevitably were not able to log on to online classes consistently due to lack of internet or lack of device, which is an unfortunate reality. So a certain group of children will have been left behind. Then there are those students who are very good at self-study and making the most of the online learning and the asynchronous learning. They may have gone way ahead, and then there'll be all the students in between who have maybe been following the online classes and just preventing learning loss, but haven't learned much, which is new. So you have these three categories of students, and suddenly the normal variation which exists in any class will have increased massively. And so my suggestion will be that actually, unfortunately, when we get back to school, we will for some time probably have to segregate students into these different ability groups until the time that they get back on track to the same level. Otherwise, it would simply be impractical when the variation in students' learning levels is so widely spread apart. So this is kind of the preparation for what happens when we get back. Then we have a question from Mr. Lawrence. Can we think of providing YouTube classes that can be used by other school students? Well, yes, why not? I mean, this is one of the reasons why I appreciate Entab's initiative in organizing something like this and the initiatives of others is that it brings educators together from all different schools all across the country on a common platform, and enables the sharing of ideas. And where schools may unfortunately otherwise be competitive with each other, right now there is more of a spirit of sharing of knowledge and collaboration, which is wonderful. And I hope that this spirit continues long after this crisis. But right now we should make the most of it. And if there are teachers who are recording lessons and who want to share it, that can only be a wonderful thing. And I really encourage teachers to do that. And in our school, we have created online this platform called Open Educational Resources. And we are in the midst of refining our platform, but actually we've made them open online, and I will again share that link with the Entab team to share with all the participants. And it basically, subject-wise, topic-wise, class-wise, contains a vast range of links to learning materials of all different types: videos, worksheets, songs, whatever, which are available in the free domain on the web and organized in a way that hopefully will be useful to teachers. We still need to make improvements to that platform, but it is there, and I would be very happy to share that link openly with other educators. And I thank Mr. Lawrence very much for the question of if teachers can prepare their own YouTube classes and share them. Please do so. It would be wonderful to share this thing as much as possible. Let me see, there are a lot of questions here. Question from Mr. Akshanj. The situation has also given rise to a debate whether these online classes are actually going to replace the traditional physical classes. Would you like to comment? I can comment in one word. The answer is no. These online classes are a substitute out of necessity right now. We're doing them because we don't have any other option. And it's great that teachers are stepping up to this and students are stepping up to this. But as soon as possible, I think I speak for all educators that we hope that we can really get back onto normal in-person classes as soon as possible. I think that human connect, that ability to interact and collaborate can never be replaced. And the technology for online classes is just not up to the mark yet. So no, I don't think this is going to replace the traditional physical classes. However, having learned from this experience, what it does mean is that there are other times in the year when schools get closed, unfortunately, due to hot weather, cold weather, rainy weather, protests, closure of the internet. These things all happened this year. The Ayodhya Supreme Court judgment, all of these things led to closures of schools. So having learned from this experience, when school closes at those times, hopefully we can be better prepared and we can use the experience that we've learned now in order to do that. Here's a question from Ms. Deepti Jaiswal. With fear in mind, will students be able to concentrate in the class? In this situation, what best can a teacher do? And I think you're absolutely right. I think different students cope with stress and anxiety in different ways, and some of them do, as a result, face concentration issues. And I can totally see how in a class there may be students who are really struggling to concentrate as a result of their anxiety. And I think what teachers need to do in such situations, first of all, is to be very accepting of this fact and very warm and open to students demonstrating these types of problems. And I think secondly, engagement with parents. This is something which I should have mentioned earlier. In fact, I forgot, but I'm glad this question came up, because I think engagement with parents is a really valuable thing at this time, to make sure that students and parents and teachers, all these three stakeholders, are on the same page about how online learning should be done and how their children are feeling. And a lot of our teachers have conducted PTMs, parent-teacher meetings, online, and I think they've been quite effective. And it's just been establishing that connect with parents and making parents realize then the purposes for which you're conducting these classes, and making parents realize that now is absolutely not the time to be putting extra stress on students for working towards an exam or for completing the syllabus. Making parents understand that now is the time to make sure their students keep engaging with the online learning, but just for the sake of keeping up with their peers, keeping up with the teacher, keeping their routine, and preventing their learning loss. So I think that the managing anxiety will be helped if teachers engage a lot with parents, and PTMs could be done more regularly than normal. I think a lot of schools conduct PTMs maybe once in every 2 months or so, but now they can be conducted once every 2 weeks. There's no harm in doing that, and I think it'd be very helpful. Then a question from Ms. Divya Dhingra. How do I motivate and engage in an online environment? This is a very good question, because I, in my role as a leader, as a manager, if I'm being very honest, I'm facing a similar problem in a different way. That, as a leader, one wants to be able to motivate one's team. And personally, I rely a lot on the face-to-face connect in order to do that. And right now, that face-to-face connect is not there so much, and it's much harder to do. So one has to start looking towards other strategies. And I think, a very important thing that I've experienced with staff, and I think the same thing applies to students, is creating a sense of camaraderie, of community, of everyone being in this together. I think that's something that becomes very motivational to students, that it's a kind of crisis time, it's a challenge, and everyone has to get through this challenge together. If everyone feels that, their motivation increases. And so that can be done, again, partly by the idea of bringing people together in an assembly type setting, but also making sure, again, in each class that there is time spent for interaction about non-subject matters, just talking about people's days, how people are spending their time, the situations in people's homes, and letting people reflect and share this kind of thing openly, so that sense of community and camaraderie is really strong. That, I think, can be very helpful to a sense of well-being of a student, and therefore their motivation as well. Now, let me just have a look at the questions. Please bear with me one moment. Thank you for your patience. There's a question here, which is, most of the schools still hesitate in implementing technology in schools. Will the lockdown open up and make them bring in more technology in school? What's your opinion on this? So one thing, first of all, I must say, I must congratulate teachers, not only of CMS, but of all schools around the country, that I think teachers have, defied a lot of these expectations, which said that teachers are not comfortable using technology and all of that, because I think they've risen to the challenge. They've rapidly learned how to use the technology, and they've very quickly developed a lot of expertise in using learning technology. And I think this is fantastic. And it shows that these teachers had the ability all along, and we should have had faith in them. And those of us who did have faith in them may have something of an advantage in this situation, because there would have been ongoing training and the use of certain education technology, which has held teachers in good stead for this time. So is it likely that more technologies will come into schools as a result of this? I think yes. And again, as I answered before, that is never going to replace what the teacher is doing, but the use of technology is something that can definitely enhance what a teacher is doing. It's a very powerful tool in the hands of a good teacher. And I think now that teachers will have become more tech savvy and more comfortable with the idea of technology, they'll be more open to using it. The entire education technology industry at this time has become, has really been making the most of this crisis and made their products freely available, and got a lot of students and teachers onto those products. And I think having got used to that, a lot of people will continue to use that. Certain products which are very useful right now, the types of products are, as I mentioned, these kind of reading apps that can really track a student's reading level and give them targeted reading. But extending that principle from reading to other subjects too, there are apps which cover maths, English, sciences, other subjects that are basically personalized or adaptive learning apps. So as students are using such an app, they are answering questions, and the system is understanding the level of that student and then pitching content which is most suitable to that student according to them, and really personalizing the learning experience. That's something which has been very useful at the present time to a lot of schools because of this crisis situation, but it's something that I think will continue to be useful even after this crisis is over. So I think I think technology use will continue to be used. And on this subject, another question has just come in from Rana Lodi. What is the future of underprivileged students in advanced technology? And that's a really important question, because if we keep talking about all this technology, of course, there's a certain amount of technology that can be provided in the school, but the technology which is available in the home is, of course, limited to the home environment. And I think the way to bridge that gap, which various schools are trying to realize, is by making that school-based technology available to students more and more. And I think what I've seen some schools doing, and we've even been experimenting with this prior to the lockdown, and I definitely see us experimenting with more beyond the lockdown, is, for example, school computer labs, making them open to students after school, making them available so that if a teacher wants to set a homework, for example, that is digital in nature, that has to be done on a computer system, and that student doesn't have easy access to a computer system at home, they should be allowed to stay back after school, and they should have a teacher who is available to just supervise them. They should have the facilities around. There should be adjustments to the transport. If they take school transport, school buses, or something like that, there should be an adjustment to the transport schedule to accommodate them, to give them absolute maximum time available with those devices, so that they can do it like a homework in their own time, but not have to worry about having a device at home. And if you can do it after school and before school. And then a few schools with slightly older students have been experimenting with, in school, instead of having a separate computer lab, you have a set of laptops that move around class to class on a trolley. And the advantage of those laptops is that if you have with older, more responsible students, if you have a strong contract in place which they sign and which the parent also signs to just make sure that things are secure and you know who is liable for damages, if you have that in place, you can trust students to take those laptops to their home every once in a while if there is some homework or task that demands it. So that way, the less privileged students can continue to use technology outside of the classroom. And I think it's important. It's a very important question. I'm very glad that students should, that the teachers should be thinking about this. A question from Mr. Rajiv. You're very kind, Mr. Rajiv. So, as a fan, I'm asking this question to you. What is the first thing you do after the lockdown? um, Me, I mean, I want to just go out, get fresh air, go for a run, a cycle ride, go to the park, and hopefully enjoy the summer, and just really, I think I'm probably packing on the pounds sitting here and in one space all the time. And I hope to just run around and get a lot of air. And if it is declared safe, then of course I would love to just resume, the life of occasionally being able to meet up with friends in coffee shops and this sort of thing. Um, so I think, Mr. Rajiv, I guess it's been a 45-minute session, so I think our time is up. Are there any more questions or anything else you would specifically like me to address at the present time? I'll just wait for your response in the comments. No, and otherwise, I'm truly grateful for all of the participants who very kindly came online today to hear me share a few views. And I hope, I'd be very glad if any suggestions could be helpful to any educators. And I just really, really hope that educators will be prioritizing making student well-being the number one issue at the present time. So I'm, again, very grateful to the Entab team, very grateful to members of my own team from CMS who seem to have kindly joined this call on their Sunday, and of course, very grateful to many other educators from around India who are on this call today. So thank you very much to Rajiv sir and to all the others, and wish you all of the best. Stay safe, stay healthy, and think about your own well-being as educators. That should be a topic for another webinar sometime, I hope, because we're talking so much about students' well-being, but we'll need to have a whole topic on educators' well-being some other time. And just one more word to say, great gratitude and awe, really, for the efforts of educators at CMS and around the whole country who are really trying hard to adopt this technology and make learning work during this time, and really looking after their students from the heart. I think it's really, truly remarkable, and it's been going really well. So keep it up, and God bless you all. Thank you very, very much, and I'll sign off now.